We are here with Clifton Harski. Am I saying that right?
You are. It's as Polish as it gets.
Nice. You are a trainer, I'm assuming, right?
I'm a fitness trainer, trainer of trainers, exercise enthusiast.
Right. Yeah. I've looked through your profile, and I know Nathan met you a long time ago with or from his like first lifting coach, I believe. But other than that, I don't really know a whole ton about you. So I'm going to kind of ask, what your experience was and what got you into the industry. When did you know that this was kind of the lane that you wanted to go into?
Goofily enough, my freshman year of college, I went in undecided or undeclared, whatever it is. It's long enough now that I don't know what the terminology is. But growing up playing basketball, volleyball, all the sports, and having athletic parents that played collegiate sports and professional dancer, etc. I've always been shamed by them to be fitter, or encouraged to be fitter, and wanted to dunk on people. So I've always had this interest in like, how am I going to dunk on people as a skinny 6-foot white guy? And so that was literally the genesis for getting after it. And then that turned into being the weirdo that's like watching people work out in the gym. Like, oh, that's very interesting, like what they're doing over there. And then you realize you look like a creeper. It's like, I better only watch the guys in the right neighborhoods, and then I won't be a creeper.
Yeah, right. Nobody can see you from the wrong angle of the mirror. You're good.
Yeah, go double mirror ricochets.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you were obviously like training for your own self-interest at that point. I share a similar sentiment in wanting to dunk on people. I haven't done it. It sounds like you have. You got to that point.
I've been fortunate enough to catch some bodies, as the kids would say.
Nice. Jealous.
Yeah, look, it's bodies on putbacks or alley-oops because it's a little easier to catch people off guard that way. I have admittedly not driven and then elevated on someone that is jumping with me and dunked on them. It's been like, oh, the rebound's up and he's dunking on that person. So it's still pretty cool. It's not quite the same though, if we're being real.
Yeah. And then when did you start working with other people?
I started working with other people. That would have been my second year of college. So my first year of college, I did play junior college basketball. And that's really where I finally started to put on some weight. I graduated in high school at 155, at same height as I am now. I'm about 50 pounds heavier now. And so I finally put on weight. And that was when buddies of mine, it's nothing official, but it was, hey, I kind of know what I'm doing. Let's train with my buddies. And we got in better shape.
That's dope. What do you think was the biggest reason or one of the reasons for you being successful in getting that weight on?
I think a lot of it had to do with stop growing upwards, right? Like I finally, even through the end of senior year, I was still getting a little bit taller. It wasn't like I was super tall. I'm 6'1", right? And but I was entering into my senior year. I was just shy of 6 feet. So I got an inch and a half my senior year. And I think once the adolescent energy is stopping from going vertically, you can finally fill out horizontally. And the other piece of it would have been simply less total sports, less total volleyball, followed by basketball spring lead, followed by this, followed by that, and a little less total energy output so that I could actually put on a little weight and more dedicated weight training, right? Like you only do so much in high school.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said there, specifically when you say you had more output or less output and you were able to confine your energy or at least give it to what you wanted to give it to. The difference I think a lot of people make an argument for is like athletes who are doing track or athletes who are running and whatever, they can still build up propulsive ability without necessarily putting on mass, and they can jump higher, they can run faster, whatever it may be. Would you say that there's a difference in tissue quality? Like you were perhaps maybe more dense when you were an athlete, and then there was like a transition over to increasing your muscle size and that changed?
It's interesting. So For me personally, I've always been kind of rubber bandy, springy, right? Like even when I was sub 6 in junior, as a junior, I was able to dunk.
Yeah.
With that being said, as I got thicker, I got stronger as well, and I didn't lose. If anything, I gained more explosiveness
Yeah.
and could do it in a couple of ways. So as a junior and a senior, it was very momentum driven off of one foot and springy. Whereas later on, that became, now I can stand underneath the basket and jump without momentum or elasticity. And so now you have two options for performance, which is a strength-based gorilla or a kangaroo-based elastic.
Yeah.
And I think most people probably err on one side. I err on elastic, but giving myself some gorilla qualities is pretty useful.
I'm on the other end of things, where I think I had a couple of injuries that like tested or challenged my elasticity too early on. Like I had my ACL almost tore in like 9th grade football, and I have like an 1.5 inch of give or something like that. That's what I'd been told, which basically meant I didn't use my knee the way I would normally have for an extended period of time. And then I had no notion of recovery or rehab, or even that was something that was a kid needed. So there was a point where I let my leg atrophy, and while I was still lifting, and my upper body built out to where my lower body was no longer as connected to it. So I noticed that the jumping mechanism, I was actually told if I do that, I was training, I tried to do a jump, and he's like, you don't jump with your arms. I was like, what do you mean? It's like, oh, no wonder I'm not like a bounce coach or a spring coach or whatever. I'm like, I can't jump myself.
Yep. Yeah. Arms just firmly planted. No transition from upper to lower. I've seen that. You know what? Like if we had to make a guess, football players versus basketball players, which of the two have more elasticity as a general rule? It's the basketball players. And so when you watch football players come over and you're like, they just kind of move blocky, not quite stiff, but like kind of slower and blocky. You know, I remember LT coming and playing with us, and Antonio Gates a little less, but you just bowl through people and not try to be smooth with the moves at all. He's just like, no, just run straight through all you assholes and then jump.
Yeah, there's a huge difference in sports where a bracing sport versus a sport where you can maneuver more. I think that cleats versus basketball shoes probably play a big role in ankle stability both ways.
Yeah, for sure.
Can't say one way. I've never really worn basketball shoes, but cleats have definitely made my feet smaller.
Yeah, that makes a ton of, even basketball shoes. I had a relatively large transition with footwear, in that I grew up playing basketball as my primary sport, also played volleyball. I grew up around the world, so I played, soccer, cricket, rugby, all the things. And but the principal thing was basketball, and basketball shoes have a lot of cushion, right? Like it's always about more cushion, more cushion, more cushion. Well, I got one of my first jobs traveling and teaching workshops was for a company called MovNat, Move Naturally, or on the core, right? And that's a barefoot type of situation. Now, the reason I was there was partly because of the transition I had at work, where I had a lot of really bad plantar fasciitis. I was a manager at Trader Joe's, working 50 hours a week on your feet, doing shit. And I kept upsizing my support traditional, and it would be better for a month, and then it would be worse. That was when Nike Frees came out. And the first Nike Free was the 5.0, and I wore those, and I was like, oh shit, this is better. And I kind of looked into their rationale about less support, and I downsized to the 4.0, then the 3.0, then the Free 1, and then I just had Chucks with no cush, and then Vibrams were finally a thing with the 5 fingers, and then I was the weirdo at Trader Joe's working 5 fingers. But I got really lucky in that's a great graded exposure to less support.
Yeah.
And versus all the people that probably got screwed up feet, ankles, knees, etc., from just going like max cush Vibrams, with no progression, if you want to call it that. Anyway, so I was doing that for a couple of years, or it was like a year or two progression to where I went to MovNat. So the difference was when I was at MovNat for the 2 years traveling and teaching, I didn't play basketball for that entire time. When I finally came back and put on the basketball shoes, it was very weird. You had no connection with the ground. It's just like, I'm like, wow, I'm running on clouds. This is outrageous. And you can't play basketball in no cushion.
Totally.
Because when you jump and you land, like you're going to hit your heels eventually, and shit's just going to bruise on a basketball court.
I
That's
did
so
that. I actually probably did a minor fracture playing on concrete in like a barefoot type shoe. I was just like, I like turned the ball over and I was like sprinting back to get like the chase down block or whatever. And in that like last plant step, I went hard heel, and that's where it went. And it wasn't bad enough for me to stop playing. But it was like a recurrent thing for a good like 3 to 4 months that I had to let it heal. And I was actually able to like play in like the zero like court shoe, like playing on a hardwood. And I got to the point where I could handle it. My feet are just super rigid though. So I already have a super immobile foot, which kind of lends myself to like being able to handle those forces, I think. I actually right now, like I tore my Achilles a few months ago, which, you know, maybe there's something to how I progressed too quickly into barefoot shoes in that. But I think when I return, I might play around with actually going to the more supportive footwear and actually giving myself more of like a sensory feedback in an arch support to like kind of help guide my really stiff foot down in that absorption.
Sure.
I don't know. What do you think about that in terms of just like, what's the ideal like basketball footwear? Is it a blend between like the more minimalist and the higher cushion, more supportive?
Yeah, I like the Kyrie's. To get really specific, Kyrie uses a minimal amount of zoom because his feedback to the shoemakers is he wants to feel more connected to the floor. And if you look at how Kyrie plays, it's very quick change direction. So there's some unique benefits to basketball shoes, even compared to the zero, because I have the zero cross trainers, and I know they recently put out their zero court shoes, which I thought of buying specifically for that. I don't worry about knees over toes guy. I don't know the guy, right? But I see him putting out all the shit about playing in his zeros. I'm like, yo, I'm positive you're gonna fuck up your feet at some point here, because if unless every single rim you're doing is 8 feet with a good camera angle, like you're coming down and there's not a lot of fat pads or cushion underneath those heel bones, and the shit is going to eventually land incorrectly, and that's not going to be enough. But to your question, I think playing in a basketball shoe makes sense. Like we could argue, yes, people used to play in Chuck Taylors. That's still quite a bit more cushion, right? But the problem with Chuck Taylors, they got the straight edges. So something like a Kyrie that has rounded edges, so you don't catch that edge and twist your ankle like a lever that flips you over, is hugely important to me. And just trying to minimize the amount of Air Max on top of Zoom, on top of the bubble. Like some of those, the LeBrons are just wildly cushioned. Even the old Kobe's were pretty cushioned, but you get the low profile Converse and Kyrie's look like they work out pretty well.
I had Steph's, and I went back to them after like spending a lot of time in barefoot, and I just like couldn't handle how compressed my foot was. And maybe I was a size smaller than I should have been, because that's what I wanted at the time, especially having like kind of crappy ankles. I wanted to feel like I've got all the support and that it's just like one block of a unit. But potentially if I go up a size and I get that like cushion to like space and freedom ratio right, maybe that's the sweet spot.
That's definitely a piece. And so that's actually one of the things I was going to go to when I first came back and I played basketball with those shoes. My everything from the knee down was debilitatingly sore from being able to push into the shoe and have some movement. It's almost like a little hydraulic pump to everything in the lower leg. That ruined me. And I put on shoes that I had been wearing for the year prior to traveling. And to your point of nowhere to spread, 2 years being barefoot, my toes were like, spread out now effectively. You could see a visible change, pinkies not curling underneath the ring toe, et cetera. So when I put those basketball shoes back on, I absolutely felt like they were in a coffin. Like, it's probably not good for us. And so many of the basketball shoes are made that way. So, there's not a lot of wide toe box, because then you have the potential for your foot shaking in the shoe. And so, I mean, look, fucking basketball is not a natural thing to be doing. It's not really in line with any type of evolutionary type of situation.
So you had made a specific point a minute ago about the heel not being super cushioned, and particularly when people are jumping and landing on their heels, that's where they tend to bruise. What I've been noticing recently, I think Compound Performance, I forget his name. Yeah. He had posted on the same like anecdotal ankle exercises that have you going into extreme forms of I don't remember what it was, but it's people having their heel lifted off the ground and really trying to exert some form of rotation through the limb. And so you see it in like Goda, you'll see it in a couple of other offshoots of a similar notation. But people are essentially taking out the bounce and spring of their leg in a lot of their like ankle driven exercises that have them lifting that heel off the ground and not exposing it. And
Yeah.
so I wonder, what is the best thing that you've experienced or done for yourself to build out that pad and to create that allowance for heel contact?
Honestly, I can't say that I've done anything to build it out. In spending a lot of time barefoot, and what I mean by a lot of time barefoot, it peaked when I led 6 weeks in a row of 5-day courses in West Virginia, where we said no shoes. Okay. And part of the daily exposure was walking, and then by the end of the week, jogging over gravel. And so at that point, and I got fucked up at one of the trail runs through the woods because I stepped on a leaf, but there was a knot of a tree root, and that bruised my heel. So even though I built up to it, and like you used to do a tradition in San Diego on Cowles Mountain. If you've ever gone up, it's the highest peak in San Diego. Yeah. You have to carry a 24K bell without putting it down barefoot. We would do it a couple times a year, and that was no big deal for my feet at that point.
Yeah.
So where I don't know as though I added any thickness other than callus. Yes, there's more callus, so the skin itself is thicker. I didn't feel like there was any squishier or more fat pad or muscle or anything like that. But what you end up is increased sensitivity and decreased sensitivity. And what I mean there is your decreased sensitivity to just general ouchiness of different feelings, but you also develop more awareness of feeling the ground shape and changes. So it's like if you didn't have gloves on type of thing.
Right. A larger allowance for sensory reception. I mean, a lot of people run around with some claw or grip to the ground that they're not even looking to feel what's happening in that interim response. Like majority of the foot is reflexive. It's why we can't control it as well as we can control the hand. So there's a lot of that stuff that happens by way of just how we load it through motion. So if you jump a lot, you're probably going to be elasticizing the arch a lot and the Achilles. So there's going to be load on that heel. So that is when you land on it, there's going to be some like eccentric or like shock absorption relationship. I find that people trying to construct their limbs without moving, but like taking shape and taking isometric position, it's a really popular thing right now. It's almost like thematically that's the way you start exercise now. And we do a lot of isometrics, but in the same mind of how you say you built up callus, but you didn't build up that squishiness. An isometric should drive toward better blood flow. It should drive toward better neuro recruitment or neuromotor recruitment. And that only happens when you create better sensation or better like blood volume into the area. And you do that with jumping if your Achilles is super elastic. But if you don't have that, I've been like standing on some tempering stuff to get my heel to come to a little bit more squishiness like my palm. It's just very interesting to find that so many people are living in a state of, like I was, perpetual stress response as a byproduct of limited feedback or limited absorption capability in their foot. And then they design a programming around, let's focus more thought into the foot, not less, and more security into it. So there's like an inundation of like going with the deficits of the nervous system, as opposed to being like, jumping has always been a precursor for human being like athletic. Get back to jumping. If you can't do that, do a variation, like jog a little bit. If you can't do that, step down. Find your means, but get yourself to the standards And that is like something that's almost been entirely lost in this let's look the way we want to look society.
Yeah, it definitely has. So you asked about compound. I trained with him this morning. We had a 6 a.m. track session.
I was wondering if I'd seen him on your story. I was like, there's someone walking down the stairs opposite you. And I was like, that's for sure someone I've seen before.
Yeah. So he's out here in the loo, and we call it Old Man Track Club, where he's nursing a little bit of a meniscus thing. I've got a meniscus thing. And so it's nice because it's like, cool, we can both be responsible instead of accidentally pushing each other.
Yeah. It's also pretty cool that you guys are both identifiably off the top of my head, probably the most athletic in the category of coach that coaches coaches. See how many times I can say that word in one sentence. But you guys are educators of people who do this professionally, and there's a lot of like facilitating or educating in how to better facilitate. But one thing that represents true with both you guys is you like own it. You guys live in a body that demonstrates your ability to communicate the information. Like you post them like it's a funny aspect, but it's a truth to how well built out you are, that like people will comment on how big your ass is. And that's something that like fundamentally I didn't realize dudes didn't have for so long until a year and a half ago. And I was like, holy shit. Yeah, I need to work on it. I'm impressed by how you don't need to work on it. It's
man,
it's lacking.
Need them glutes.
Totally, but it's the same thing. It's an attachment to that same bounce thing. Like if you don't have the elasticity, where someone will say, go to say posterior chain, and they'll do those isometrics and they'll do those like fixed ankle positions, but they won't do the thing that's going to load that sequence of how to prevent those bones from hitting ground before they're able to be loaded. So like if someone's going to load too heavy through their hips, or they're going to tuck their pelvis, there's going to be some weird sequencing where that hamstring doesn't recruit properly, and they're not going to be able to load it through their back. And majority of people will probably stopper that motion thinking that their foot is going to control it, as opposed to them being able to receive it. So like they're tensing prior to. I'm getting off on a tangent, but it demonstrates that you have like a healthy or relatively healthy pelvic floor, because the musculature is stabilizing it, which is what muscle does, is toned out in a way you don't have to like seek much constructive support for it, which is something that a lot of people in these isometric communities are like, we're trying to figure out how to get our low back right. We're trying to figure out how to get our hamstring right, whatever it may be. At the end of the day, what is the most simple form of this, like bouncing, running, walking? What is the best form of someone to introduce, and how can they progressively overload that simple thing?
Well, if they're going from ground zero, it's funny, I actually just talked about this with a coach today that wanted to get back into running, and I was sharing my experience. Like I do a lot of jumping. I don't do a lot of what are the cool kids calling it these days? Extensive, right? So high repetition, low level jumping. I don't do a ton of that. I usually I'm focusing on high output jumps. So when I went and did my first set of running, my lower leg, calf, Achilles, soleus, they were just toast, right? They were toast for 4 days. And that was not unexpected. And I cut my training sessions short by half of what Kyle did. I should have cut it to like a third, and then my soreness would have been like 2 days instead of 4. And it doesn't really matter that I do calf raises, I do soleus. The ground contact and the fast eccentric, the high neural output on that reflexive fast eccentric is going to ask all that musculature, anything that I'm doing, whether it be a high effort, long duration iso or overcoming or any of the shit. It's just, you can't quite recreate it. Now with that being said, I've taken myself there a couple of times, and it looks like, hey, first week, go 2 times a week, do 2 runs of whatever that length might be, right? So for me, it'd be 2 100s. And then if you have access to it, follow it up with assault bike or elliptical or stepper, something that is still working similar muscles in that high repetition volume. And then also get in some 2-footed low level jump rope. And so the idea with the 2-footed, Now I got my whole body weight with less force coming down because it's not as powerful as a stride shared between both lower leg complexes. So I'm building up that volume capacity. And so then on day 2, do the same shit and assess how sore was I? Can I add another run? And gradually I'm going to pull back my cardio equipment, whatever that happens to be, and my jump rope, and replace it with the running equivalent of what that thing is. That's how I would do it. It just need to be a very graded exposure. When I finally got back to basketball after having a couple of surgeries, I played one game twice a week for I think it was 6 weeks. And then finally I was like, all right, 2 games. And you sometimes you got to be the asshole. They're like, you make 10, you got to play. I'm like, I don't have to play. This is 24-hour fitness, and it's not that great of a run. So I'm just seeing if I can get that. So it would just be a very graded exposure. The extensive plyos or jumping, just high repetition. We don't need these fancy terms. Higher rep stuff, lower level stuff. Get that, and just you need less of it to begin with than we ever think. All of us trainers have done that accidental thing where like, all right, you've been training for a while. Let's do 3 sets of 10 calf raises. And then the person is blown out, right? Like it's just a part of the body that people just haven't, general population, especially. And then even fitness trainers, they don't train in any athletic way that involves high impact forces and fast eccentrics or power output. It's slow controlled gastroc machine or soleus machine, if they even have that.
So in mind of that, I think that a lot of people get fixated on misrepresenting what it is they're doing in that space, either getting convoluted signals from their body that they can't do what other people are doing because they have whatever. But it's all stimulus exposure. And the more stimulus you have in any one environment, you're probably going to start to adapt to that one environment. And if your environment is machines, you're probably going to have a very assisted environment for a lot of your like movements. That being said, those machines, like you say, that coming back on that assault bike, coming back on jump rope, both those things can help you re-implement a lot of the same mechanical function without having the same output or the same fuel demands. So the stress that your body might be experiencing having done it, you can still kind of like ambiently hang out in that space without really pushing the red line. And that's what a lot of people, I guess, don't remember the feeling of anymore, because whether it be they're not elastic enough to really load their tissue to that. I mean, there's a measure of pressure that comes into the body, like negative pressure that comes into the body when you're exerting yourself so heavily that you have to tolerate that CO2 buildup. You have to tolerate that heat buildup. All those things are levels of stress tolerance that if you get to a certain point of non-familiarity, like you sit down for too long or you've not exercised for too long, you're no longer that adapted. So there has to be that threshold of, oh, I forgot how to do this. Let me re-implement a lot of these things. Let me rebuild the tissue for it. Self-assessment, I found, is the hardest thing for people to do for themselves, which is really what training is. It's like providing people the framework to be watched in self-assessment. And so have the allowance to be like, okay, I'm checking this out. Chill, you're good. This is good. Like having people build out that gradual awareness. I think basically what I'm saying at the end of the day is on the point that you say most people don't do anything athletic anymore. I think most people are in such a stress state, such a threatened state, either because their environment is something that's not coming and pushing at its level. So they don't get to mirror that behavior. They just get to watch their own mirror, literally mirror their own behavior. That there's no longer that push to like, I can't stress myself out intrinsically unless I have either an external device or I have enough neural recruitment. I can't necessarily do that through an isometric in the way that a weight could do that for me or some movement exercise. And that's something that I think a lot of people not only forget, they lose a sense of, like their body residually no longer remembers it.
Yeah. But let me see if this analogy matches what you're saying. When I have my employees, and I still teach this at certifications, so many of our clients, they rely on exercises eventually becoming hard versus being able to make them hard immediately. And so using your example of an isometric, so overcoming, I'm pushing as hard as I can. How long can you really do an overcoming? A handful of seconds, right?
Right.
because it's max effort.
Yeah.
I've tried to use that with general population, and it's a disaster because they have no idea how to elicit effort in order to make that hard. They have to rely on a yielding isometric so that it eventually becomes heavy. And it's the same thing is true with their weight selection. Hey, we're going to do this for 30 seconds and then just keep going. Like I need more time. It's like, no, you need to have your fucking weight is what you need. You need to be able to put effort in. And it is multifactorial why they might not pick heavier weights. But a big piece of it, to your point, is they just haven't had any need to put forth effort, and they don't know how.
Yeah, and the don't know how could be I've never done it, and so that mental image of doing it is like a foreign prospect of entering a building that has all of its lights out.
Yeah, and it's scary. I mean, look, shit, I said to Kyle, I was like, if I was just a person that has not worked out since like a youth at PE or free time, and I came in and did this workout, which was not much. It was 8 50s and 6 100s with walking in between. That is not a lot of running, especially for someone that looks like I'm pretty fit, but I'm not specifically fit in the lower leg to running.
Sure.
But that's an amount of stuff that a normal human being that doesn't work out would absolutely go and do. And then if they're sore for the 4 days I was, they're panicking. They go to the doctor. They're worried that they hurt something forever, and they'll run away from working out again because they're like, no, that's just too hard. That's too uncomfortable. Fuck it. Like, I'll do whatever I was doing before, which is just eat cheeseburgers or something.
Yeah, truthfully, that's the sedation of if you're not getting enough input stimulus, you're going to in some way manufacture some. I guess this is a different tangent, but I've noticed that, and it's something that I talked to, I think, had you met Chris Daly ever?
I know the name, but I'm not putting a face on it.
S10 Fitness.
S10, yes. I went and did a session with him actually.
Yeah, that's right. I was talking to Chris about behaviors that people lead to when they're stress induced or when they're in a particular, like what makes you incumbently feel better when you're in a stress state. And then it really gave me clarity on what midline is when he's like, all of those are midline behaviors. So if you're drinking, anything going down your throat, it challenges and or upregulates reflexive behavior, like the swallow, like a number of things that you do so as to like in between breaths or whatever, but they're sedative. They help you downregulate your heartbeat, and they help you essentially calm in the body. So smoking, drinking, oral fixation, stuff that has to do with the mouth, people who sing a lot, things like that, those are inherently midline promotive. And so there's a lot of people who, if they don't have the ability to feel the reflexive feedback of their midline bracing and or handling something, whether it be running and bracing the ground or drinking or going underwater and bracing the throat, then there's going to be an affect of what do I go to be able to feel that stimulus, to be able to feel my organelles or my organ systems without there being some inductive vibration or perturbation or something to make me feel, oh, I'm working, I'm bracing, I'm doing it, because that's what the brain is looking for. So I found that most people will justify stimulus and they'll get stuck in some framework of stimulus like over and over and over, and their brain cognifies the repeated habit of it, whether it be drinking, smoking, whatever, like talking a lot. There's a lot of things that people can do in behavior that essentially replace exercise energetically or stimulatively, and they don't have the same feedback response. So it's a way that people can, if they're having trouble adjusting, if they think in terms of, oh, this is how my throat feels right now, all I got to do is the way that I was looking for that comfort when I was drinking, or I could find that awareness when I'm drinking. I'm comfortable here. If you can translate that same comfort to your exercise, to your intention around exercise, there's so many habits that people can break that bring you from sympathetic to parasympathetic. I guess in turning this into a question, so it's not another one of those like, where did this come from? Are there any things that you do or notice yourself doing, like a Michael Jordan tongue out, or like humming or something like that, that you feel commercializes focus, gets you really in the zone? You're like, oh, I didn't know I was doing that.
I get other coaches will comment that I just basically go completely relaxed face. So it's not a tongue driver, it's not an oral driver or anything like that. I don't know if that falls in the same category or if it's something similar at all.
Totally.
It seems like it would be. I mean, like we have a pretty, within our PPSC community, we have a comical video where we do a challenge. Can you go half your body weight for 25 reps on a goblet squat? And I was shooting for, let me see if I can get 80, and I got to 76. But for the entire 76, it's just zero expression on my face.
Yeah.
And to the point where, like, finally at 76, weirdly enough, on that, my forearms cramped out from holding the freaking weight, and so I dropped it. But at that point, I broke the face. So that would be my only thing I could consider, because I've heard it a bunch of times throughout my life, is like, he doesn't look like he's trying at all, but that looks like it's a lot of effort, but he doesn't look like he's trying.
Yeah.
Like,
is it possible that when you go that serious face or that calm face, you get yourself to feel more airway, or you get yourself to feel more surety of like the suction, and you're like, your mouth is closed, or there's something that you find is like less moving or less mobile to allow for?
I was trying to recreate it right there. I think I got the tongue to the roof of my mouth pretty aggressively.
Mm-hmm.
I know that once I start having to work hard, I'm going to be like, I'll be exhaling through lips and not just nasal breathing the whole time. That'd be pretty impressive. But
there are some people that are doing it. There's some people that are like exclusively training, like taping their mouth shut, and they're like running.
Yeah, I can see that from a recovery day and building your very low level aerobic base. But
or try out go up in mountains for a day.
Yeah, so we get carried away pretty easily in the industry.
For real. What do you think the like the most overrated thing people do as like an introductory or replacement exercise is right now?
Replacement in what way?
If you're going to be doing standard lifting sequences, whether it be Olympic lifts or some standard variation of in-gym exercise, what are you seeing that people are doing a lot right now that's kind of like mudding the topic or taking people away from where they could otherwise be?
I mean, I guess it would be controversial. I'm not the biggest fan of bilateral squats for a lot of people out of the gate. And the reason is, whether it be flexibility, mobility, however the hell you want to call it, we're taking them through their feet are fixed. And now we're asking their immobile bits, whether it be ankle, knees, hips, whatever, to have to work around these fixed pathways. And oftentimes they don't have it. And so what's going to, if you compound that with the fact that they have weakness, no strength, that means if the muscular system is not doing its job, the structural system is going to take more burden. And if that structural system is taking more burden in more torqued, weird positions, like, no wonder this shit just hurts people. So I can tell you, in looking at my programs at FitWell, I don't know what the reps and sets are. I just would look across the week, and I'm like, look, if I have 2 bilateral squats in every day, and my average clients come 3 to 5 days a week, I'm going to get a lot of reports of sore knees.
Yeah.
And it's just the deep knee bends in a bilateral stance are more provocative than deep knee bends in a unilateral stance, with the exception for people that have already anterior knee pain, whether it be quad tendon or patella tendon, or patellofemoral pain for more ladies. And that's a rear knee on split squats or reverse lunges more than it is the front knee anyway. So it's not even the work leg, it's the leg that's getting stretched across that anterior tissue. So I just change them to step ups or Bulgarian split squats, and they'll be fine. And so bilateral squats, man, like, to be honest, it's bilateral squats, and it's freestanding bilateral squats. If you replace them with a box squat, at a height that's reasonable, like a chair, and we build up, which is going to be a preferential posterior chain. That will give them more grounds in which to then go into a freestanding, more knee forward type of squat. So specifically to right now, the pendulum has gone way too far into the let's get my knees as far past my toes as I possibly ever can in life. Because yeah, like you should be able to do that, but not we don't need to get carried away, right? Like it's the same thing as we should be able to do a Jefferson curl with light weight, but like let's not turn things into 1RMs that should not be 1RMs or even 5RMs. Like that should, in my opinion, you can flex and load your spine safely if you progress it over time. But if you ever decide to take that and turn it into a 1RM, you're dumbass. Like you're flirting with disaster. It's like that guy that was doing a Spanish squat loaded, and he blew out both ACLs on film. You saw one go, and then obviously the other one is now holding more support, and it went. Did you not see this making the rounds on IG this like 6 months ago? It was brutal.
With the foundation, like you have your shins put into.
Yes. Yep. And he had the 40, I think it was a 45-pound on his chest, and he just went back, and it was like explode.
Yeah, that's 100%. Oh, that's not the right idea.
Yeah, it's like, no, guy, do a set of 10. And that's plenty of stress in that position.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, that position is designed for the stress you would get with a weight on your back alternatively, but you can't get that range of motion.
Dude, it's just so to me, bilateral squats, and especially like overshooting the knees over toes prematurely. I actually have an idea. I just talked about this with our PT on my team, and he was like, that's interesting. I'd love to hear what you guys have to think. All right. So I think that you get a lot of people that are pretty well muscularly developed in a traditional back squat, goblet squat, which is knees over midfoot, maybe over your big toe knuckle, but not shooting forward, right? They still do a lot of split squats. You do a lot of reverse lunges, and a knee gets to maybe where your toenail is, but it's not trying to go past. And take me, for example, like I got decent strength, but because I like to try everything out, I went and I did a 6-week period of, hey, I'm going to do the whole knees over toes thing because I want to understand where the alert is, what things I can take from this and implement, what things I can answer at courses that I'm getting questions about. If I don't experience it, it's hard to talk about it knowledgeably. And what I found is that's the first time in my life I've ever had any patellar issues. And more previously strong people that I've talked to have had the exact same thing. And my thought process is their musculature actually allows them to perform more volume in these extended ranges than they would if they were building the muscle strength in conjunction with the tendon strength to begin with. So it almost doesn't make sense. It's like, hey, if you're strong enough, you can do it, but you haven't exposed those structural tissues to the demands at those ranges. And all of a sudden you can push harder than you otherwise would be.
It's a lot of advertisement for a lot of the appeal. Like you have enough knees over toes content to go with the name.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And it's like, I still think it's a safe thing to do. I just don't, it's just not necessarily the thing that you have to, you don't have to do it in every exercise that you do.
I had tried a number of the exercises as well, and I found that, I had a lot of easy times in doing certain movements like that prior to, but in making it a priority in the gym, I realized that 1, I did start to experience patellar pain, and 2, I stopped experiencing the ability to lift as heavy. Like things had become way less stable and supportive, and I was like, output just depreciates substantially when you start to inhibit functions that are supposed to be reflexive, and that's what I was doing. I was like trying to design the reflex when I already had solid ones.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I did those for a time, and they just never felt right to me. And I've always had like kind of limited ankle range. So on one hand, it could be a way for me to attack that is to try to go into those heavily knees over toes positions and try to keep my heel down as long as I can. But I just never felt a healthy feeling balance of stress on the joint. Like I never felt like
Mhm.
my calves or my ankles are getting the same amount of shear as my knees. And maybe some people are predisposed to like naturally getting that balance, but for probably plenty of people, they're gonna just blow or push so much of the stress onto one portion of the joint and something like that.
Yeah, agreed.
So you obviously play around with a whole host of different modalities. Did you study kind of like most of the movement systems that are out there? Did you just kind of like look from afar and take what was interesting and test it out?
Both. And so because I started my during my sophomore year, so I played basketball my first year. Sophomore year, I started working at Trader Joe's damn near full time while also going to school. It meant that my career was started in fitness by being a consumer of fitness. So, for instance, I did 7 weeks in a row of nothing but hot yoga, and my test of how effective it was, whatever I tested, was how do I perform on the basketball court. So I was always interested in is, does this make me a better athlete? I've always been fortunate to be lean, right? Like, so that's never really been the big thing that I'm going for. Although the shirt is making my tits look very voluptuous at the moment. Eyes up, guys, eyes up. And so 7 weeks of yoga, because you can do a free week of yoga at a bunch of yoga studios. And so my buddies and I were like, let's just see what happens. Do four or 5 days a week of yoga and see how we go. It's not good for you. It's not a good way to be better on the basketball court. By week 5, I was like, yo, I feel slower. Simple as that. I feel slower. I did 7 weeks of CrossFit. I did 4 weeks of Pilates because I couldn't make it any further. It was just like, there's some benefits. I actually think there's some very cool benefits to reformer Pilates in the long, slower isometrics and eccentrics and control. I think that a lot of people would benefit from doing that 1 time a week. But goddamn, is it boring. And so I was a consumer for a lot of different places. And then I jumped into it full time. So when I jumped into it full time, I was a cert whore. It was like, go get all the certs. And after a certain amount of time, you're like, yo, I'm just not really learning anything that's blowing my mind different. However, if that's what you're thinking is going to happen, I don't know what to tell anybody. Like, there's not that many brand new things that we're going to discover about the body, because the body has been the body for a long time. Yeah. So what I always look for, what are the common threads that people are saying between camps? Because I'm like, if me and Goda and Kyle and you disagree on 17 things, but there's 4 things we all do the same, I'm guessing those 4 are really useful.
Yeah.
And so that's oftentimes the number one thing I'm looking for when I'm trying to learn other stuff. I like to experience it. The biggest reason I still and will try to experience and participate in things for enough time to be able to feel like I have some sort of authority on it is in that educator role that I have. I get a lot of questions about other things. And if I don't know anything about it, I'll be like, look, I just don't know anything about it. If I say differently, I'd be lying. So I'd be an asshole. Here's my experience at least. And here are people that I know that have done it. So that's been my stance on how I seek out other education and systems. I was very early to CrossFit, and then it got very, very weird. I got threatened to be sued by them because I tried to, in San Diego, this was in 2008, 2009. I was like, yo, we should put like a league in all the places around here and just travel to each other's boxes. I'll put it together. You guys can pay me to do the ref and count reps or what the fuck I would be doing. And Dave Castro and Tony Budding got on the phone with me and they're like, you can't do that. We're going to sue you. I was like, Jesus Christ. I'm a fucking part-time worker at Trader Joe's. Calm down, guys. I just thought it sounded fun. I didn't know you had plans for CrossFit Games expansion globally and shit.
I didn't know if that was a thing that had been established yet. You had stepped on their fun before they were able to be like, this is our idea.
Yeah, I think it was like maybe the year after their first Up on the Farm competition. And I was like, it'd just be San Diego. Like, chill. I'm not that worried about doing it, guys. But yeah, so that's how I've always done it. It's just like experience it and then be able to talk about it. And I know like anecdotal experience doesn't mean shit compared to studies, whatever people say. It means a lot. If you haven't done it, like, I don't want to hear your opinion on it.
Yeah, studies are a referential relationship with actual experience. I think that studies can be very biased and oftentimes are very biased because they're practically trying to prove or disprove something. They're not as much trying to spend however much money it took to clinically study something to have like an ambient and or dissatisfying answer for whatever group board they're trying to appease. Like more often than not, it costs a lot of money to do something like that. You're not going to be doing something with like and this is what we know now. Everyone can do how it do it the way they want to. There's going to be some bias attached to and associated to it because
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Clifton, with the position you are in now, so it sounds like you have a bunch of coaches that kind of come to you and you're in somewhat of a mentorship role. And is that in terms of like the active training, like the technical aspects, or is that more of like in a business standpoint?
So honestly, we do a little bit of both. Currently, my principal role is the COO, so operations officer for the PPSC, and that's a company that Dr. John Russin put together.
What does that stand for?
And Pain-Free Performance Specialist Certification. Very long, and PPSC honestly sounds like I'm stuttering. PPSC, but. And to address the name, it gets some people just all in a twist. Like, you can't say pain free, and I'm like, no. Here's the deal: we're trying to educate coaches to make better decisions, to not force feed stuff on people that doesn't match their body. Because when you do that, invariably they're going to have discomfort and pain because we're force feeding a square peg through a round hole. So we can achieve a muscular effect and a structural effect and a fitness effect by better exercise selection for the individual in front of you. And unfortunately, like, that is abnormal for a lot of places, right? Like, let's take two systems that I don't dislike the systems outright, right? So the athletic truth group, knees over toes, I don't dislike the system. I think that he actually does a pretty thorough job of trying his best to make them progressible and regressive based, and there's good rationale there, and it comes from someone that's pretty well established. I mean, let's be honest, right? It's from Poliquin. It's a well established set of exercises. However, if it doesn't matter how many regressions you have, if somebody just has an injury history or structural changes in their life, to not do a split squat in that way, it's never going to work. And it doesn't mean that they can't exercise. It's like, let's do a different split. Let's do a front foot elevated straight up and down split squat, or a Bulgarian split squat. Like, there's a lot of split squats, guys. We don't have to do that one. We can get anterior knee stress in a leg extension machine, superset it with a normal split squat. We'll be good. And if we want more load, then we do a high effort isometric. There's a lot of ways to do this. And so that's what we're trying to teach. From the pain standpoint for us, we make the point. A lot of people John will use the analogy, people just keep picking the scab that they have. And so the shit never heals, right? Like, and we know trainers are really bad about this, where we know we're supposed to back squat because that's what is popular on the gram. And so I'll just keep back squatting and my back keeps hurting. And then, I get a hold of helping someone with a program, like, for 6 weeks, we're just not going to do that thing. That thing that you say always pisses off. Let's just try this wild idea, not do the thing that pisses off your back. And so that's where we are coming from pain free. We're not saying we're going to cure your pre-existing chronic pain, but we damn sure should not be making it worse as trainers by being stubborn needlessly.
Totally.
And so often it's like, remove that stress is all it is on their whole body and nervous system. Give them good inputs that they gain confidence and competence and physical qualities and tissue qualities. And then all of a sudden, like, the shit that was hurting them might not hurt them anymore.
Yeah.
Like, there's examples where it's just not going to get better. I have an 11 millimeter tear in my meniscus, and it's not magically going to reattach itself.
Right.
And like, it's just not. And so there's going to be points where I try to go play basketball again, and hey, that a deep knee flexed with rotation position might catch that and tear it more, and then I won't be able to walk for 2 weeks. or whatever. Like that happened back in April. I think I might have still been sore when we had lunch over at Phil's, and
Yeah, you were. I remember that.
yeah, I was borderline contemplating going and get a meniscectomy, and but I didn't. I just trained it because I've had a meniscal tear there since 2010. It's just gotten bigger over the years when I get a little aggressive,
Yeah.
But look, it's been pain free shit. I was dunking the other day and doing like hardcore parkour a lot of the office today. So
yeah, it's bitching. It's exciting that, like, I mean, you have young kids, so it's cool to see that. I mean, from what I can see from Instagram, and like that you're still moving around with them. Like you still have the option to like run around with your kids. I think from the onset of my dad being, I don't know, maybe 45, he had hurt his back, and it was like everything had slowed down.
yeah, man, it really changes your perspective, like your job and your children. I mean, this is basic stuff, but when it was in a way, when I decided to play basketball 3 months ago, that was a very selfish decision because of the fact that I knew I've got these issues. I hadn't been ramping up as aggressively to play basketball as I should. I played the whole game, or I played a good amount of the game, and I was crushing. It was great. Felt really good about it. I was very much enjoying it. And there was no particular bit where I pivoted and felt it. It was just like after a full court sprint, I came back, checked it, got in a defensive stance position, and couldn't load my left leg. I was like, what the fuck just happened here? And, but to me, it was like, that's Cliff, like you don't need to play basketball. You didn't get paid for it. Yes, it's thoroughly enjoyable. It's the most enjoyable physical expression that I have. But if that, like, hey, now you're putting your ability to go and teach other people that have paid you in jeopardy. You're going to have more stress on your wife, on your family, financially, on what they have to do if you have to go fix that thing. And that's a weird place to be in, because you obviously don't want to be living your life shit scared that
Totally.
you're going to hurt yourself. But
that's more an American thing. Ben's like, what are you talking about? He's in Canada.
yeah, he's like, no, go get injured. They'll put you up for 3 months and give you massages.
Yeah, that's right.
Pretty funny. So yeah, don't make bad decisions when you're an adult parent. You gotta play it easy.
So you've been through like the recovery process from like surgery and whatnot. How did you kind of self-assess when was the right time to ramp up versus no, I should probably wait? Like, for example, you said, I'm only going to play 1 game per day for like 6 weeks. Kind of what led you to that decision?
All right. So let me tell you what the surgeries were. So in 2012, on July 20th, I had a surgery on my right knee, the medial femoral condyle, where it meets the tibial plateau. I had a big bone bruise, and that bone bruise actually resulted in the articular cartilage, so cover of the femur, dying and flaking off. Oof. So about half the thickness in a penny-sized spot, which is a pretty big spot, fell off and got stuck in the joint line, so I couldn't straighten my leg. So I had to go vacuum that shit out. Once they vacuumed it out, they were like, look, it's kind of like a pothole. The bruise underneath the remaining 50% thickness of your articular cartilage is kind of like almost dead. And it's pretty avascular there, so it's probably not going to get better. We almost thought I was going to have to get oats, which is where they scoop out the dead bone, put in a slushy of bone from somewhere else that's not as much weight bearing, with some, I don't know, like literally cement or something like that. And then you're on crutches for 6 to 8 months. So I was really excited that wasn't the case. That would have been a real annoyance. But I had that surgery, and so it went as well as it can. But that bone bruise, that hole, that issue there, whether it's just like neural memory of the pain or whatever, there's random times where I'll just take a funny step, and it'll feel like someone hit me on the femur, like lightly with a hammer. Mm-hmm. And so that spot has some sort of thing that's still there. That being said, it most of the time is not a big deal. The knee itself is a little bit arthritic. If rain's coming, I'm like that old guy. I'm like, it's going to rain, guys. And then, so that was surgery. 10 days later, I had shoulder surgery. I had a decently heavy 165-pound barbell get up that I did on the right side, went to match it on the left, missed it, tore my labrum. So when they went in there, there was this labral tear, there was bursitis, I had something called a OS acromial, where the tip of the acromion is not, it's loose and it's like flittering. So I called that a lube filter oil. So to answer your question about how quickly I came back from those two, they're like, look, based on where it's at, you're not going to hurt it worse. It's going to hurt if you move, but you're not going to injure it worse. So think about that. Right knee, left shoulder, 10 days apart, 2 days post shoulder surgery, which is 12 or 13 days post knee surgery. I'm doing kettlebell swings and TRX rows. And the kettlebell swing, the idea is, hey, I need guided traction on that shoulder. So when I do the swing, I'm swinging high and just pulling it higher than I would be able to raise it on my own. Yeah. So those two surgeries, the only reason I went to physical therapist, not because I don't trust physical therapists, but because I went into the surgery strong. I was going to bounce back easily. I cleaned up my diet, so to speak, at that point, so that I was giving myself nothing but good things coming in. And then I don't know, 6 weeks post, I was basically doing everything normal again. Right. Like I was squatting. That was August 1st was the shoulder surgery. And in the beginning of December, I was Zercher squatting 405 for reps. Right. That's a decent turnaround.
Maintenance of effort minus the load. So you're like consistently retain some like heart intensity, some physical intensity, but you didn't.
To that end, I specifically the 6 weeks after that I started doing it, I was like, I'm going to do a minimum of 200 kettlebell swings per day. And after about 2 weeks, and I just went 200 heavy, broken up in the sets of 10 to 20, 200 moderate, broken up in the sets of 20 to 50, and 200 very light, either 2 sets of 100 or a bunch of juggles. Right. And I just alternated between those to keep it fresh in my mind. But I replaced intensity of weight with intensity of repetitions or density. And it worked out really, really nicely. The other surgery that I had was I was playing Tarzan on rings and I tore my lat off my humerus. So it full rupture and it snaked down into my like ribs area. So they had to fillet that, fish it out, thumbtack it. That one I took a lot more serious because they were like, it's basically like a thumbtack on wet paper on the wall. If you tear it, it will come detached again. So that one was I think the first 4 weeks, all I did was recumbent bike. And I think that's about it. Just recumbent bike. And I did like hamstring bridges and glute bridges and stuff like that as well. And they also told me not to sweat for 2 weeks or some shit like that. I didn't worry about that. Then so for the PTs and chiros, what I did do for all the surgeries is seek out people that would cup, would give me laser therapy, would do some acupuncture, do things I can't do to myself.
Right.
Like so much of physical therapy is great in that they give people exercises to try to get them strong is all it is really. Yeah. And it's just for most people, those exercises that they can handle are very low level exercises. And so when we as fitness professionals go and they give us the equivalent, I'm like, yo, dog, I squat a lot of weight. Like this little bitch ass thing that you're having me do has no effect. What do you want me to do? Like I was doing 700 times more challenging things than this last week. Like this is not going to challenge my muscle and cause a change. So it was all manual therapy that I wanted them to assist with. The lat surgery, after that 6 weeks, I bought a safety squat bar. And so I was hammering upper body and for lower body. Oh, excuse me. I wasn't hammering upper body. I was hammering lower body, specifically with a safety squat bar and machines. And I worked my way up to 245 with the Elite FTS bar for 49 reps. It was supposed to be 50, but I lost track, which is a good amount of volume on squats. And I know I said I don't really like squats, but I don't find that to be terribly heavy. And it's like, again, like what I've never not worked out, right? Like, so it's a relative thing.
Yeah,
So
when
that's
jump
long
200
answer.
pounds up to a rim, I'm sure you can handle weight on your back. The relative transfer is there's a lot of weight when you have to sprint or run or
Oh
jump
yeah.
with your body
Oh
weight.
yeah. Oh yeah. That's the coolest. That's the most. I think that's the thing that I'm happiest with in the last 2 years is Kyle and Jake Tura and oh, I feel bad I forget the other guy's name. They were talking about the 100 kilo dunk club,
Hmm.
right? And I was like, well, fuck, I only weigh 200, so I threw 20 pounds on a weight vest and managed to dunk
Damn.
with that. And I was like, that's pretty good. Now that didn't do good things for my knees; they were sore after that. But I was pretty pleased with the ability to do that.
Yeah, it's legit. Putting 20 pounds on and being able to maintain your height, let alone dunk. That's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
gotta get back there.
How are we looking for time, Ben?
We should probably wrap up. Maybe the last question I'd be interested to get your take on. If you could put one like either topic or say exercise into say an elementary school physical education program, so their PE class, and say an age where they're a little more cognizant than like grade ones, let's say like grade 4, grade 5. What would you put in there?
Exercise, not activity. Um, man, I would.
Or it could be activity. It could be activity too.
Well, activity would just be tag because it's going to be reactive. It's going to be sprinting. It's going to be moving their body all over the place, right? Like there's so many athletic qualities in that type of thing. It doesn't involve. I'd love for them to be able to manipulate an external object, but my emphasis in school was physical education in kinesiology. So I thought a lot about, and I had boys. I'm like, how do I maximize their athleticism? So something. So I think tag. It's intuitive, but they probably don't let that happen in school systems now because people are going to trip, fall, get hurt. It's going to be like you're picking on the slow kid, whatever. So if it was an exercise, I would probably do as goofy. I don't know if it's goofy sounding. I do this particular drill that I like, which is a drop lateral lunge. So if I step 45 degrees backwards into a lateral lunge, loading the right leg, I push out of the right leg, step over across the front leg on a 45-degree angle and land into a curtsy lunge. And you just go back and forth. And so this, from a spatial awareness standpoint, not working on 90-degree angles is very tough for people. So I think it's a thing that they could develop. And I make the joke of saying training your crevices. It's just one of those things. It's an angle that most people aren't training. With weird knees slightly outside of your pinky toe and pressing yourself in the curtsy lunge and being very open in the lunge in the lateral drop lunge. So you're exposing tissues to stress that just generally aren't in most people's training. So with the kids, it's getting outside of. WEC used this term like once, and it's so fucking awesome. Sagittalitis. It's such a cool. It's like that guy's so entertaining and says some very cool stuff. And sagittalitis is one of those things that I'm like, me and Rustin will steal that forever. Yeah, it would be that 45-degree combo lunge. I don't have a name for it.
That's where I met Chris Daly at WEC Method, listening to David. But the thing that I think it was Gareth on one of our former or earlier podcasts. I'm not sure if it was a question we covered, Ben, but he had talked about the periphery and it being the predominant focus for people to improve upon in terms of visual system. But you're essentially talking about the physical periphery and stepping into space where you abide your peripheral vision and not having to follow your feet with your eyes. And that's a skill that, as far as athleticism is concerned, your visual system is largely at play. And it's not just a physical effort, but it's also indoctrinating your ability to focus these structures, like the way that you go calm face. You're a lot of the time, I'm sure, focusing your vestibular and visual structure, not just giving yourself something to like reflexively make your midline more active, but Yeah, the periphery. You're talking about physical periphery, which is a lot of what we're doing. We're building out through some of the isometric attentions, through a lot of the different coordinated attentions from the neurology that feeds into the spindle of the arm and the like. We're talking about how the periphery can build out so as to be able to do what you're talking as well. So it's cool that regardless of whether or not you're talking about the far end of recovering from stress or athleticism or whatever, the periphery and abiding how much your brain is aware of this space without having to look over there. I feel like that's a huge thing for most people.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Spatial awareness is just so lacking.
Oh,
It is.
hugely so.
And it's something that you will gain some competency or naturally, like say in gym class, you're playing capture the flag, playing dodgeball, like you're in environments where you're forced to be somewhat aware of your surrounding. There's balls whipping by you or whatever, but you're not really taught how to intentionally explore your spatial awareness. Like for me playing basketball, if somebody had taken me through a drill like you just did, or a drill that like Benjamin D. Aguilar from Equilibrium showed me, where it's just like you're in the center, take a step one way, come back, take a step another way, come back, and just explore to see, okay, where are all the different ranges in this periphery that you can go. And that completely changed how I thought about like my dribbling moves, or I realized, oh, I really tend to want to go this way or straight this way. I don't necessarily explore like this crevice, as you said. So having that kind of education of like, oh, here's your kind of the map around you. Here's all the different ways you can fill up the space or the sphere with your arms, with your legs. I think that stuff would be awesome for kids to be exposed to at a young age.
Yeah, man, definitely.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Clifton. And we'll talk to you soon, man.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us, dude.